Well, well, well. We're already back for more, huh? Isn't this exciting? It's not, like, I know sometimes it takes me a second to upload in between videos, and what do you know? These are coming out, this isn't coming out too long after the last one. What do you know? What do you know? We're on a roll, guys. We're on a roll, and it's just like, I don't know. I definitely, I'm a busy man. I have other things to do in my life, and I'm sure that y'all are aware of that, and sometimes it takes a while for me to post more updates on Wind Waker Unflooded, and I have other things to do, and which is a beautiful thing. I'm glad that like I stay busy, and I have other projects and other collaborations, and I have work, and like I have a life. And so yeah, like there's things that come up, and sometimes it's a second before I can work on Wind Waker Unflooded, but it's just nice to be able to be back, and the project just always fills me with. It's always rewarding to come back to this world and feel that sense of, like, yeah, this is something I've always wanted to see. And I know there's times that, like, sometimes it inspires me more than other times. Sometimes I kind of get used to it, but then I take a break and I come back to it and I'm like, oh yeah, this really scratches an itch. I think this is a beautiful art style that, like, I think is my favorite art style from the Zelda series, and I'm just in love with it. For those that don't know, Wind Waker Unflooded is the 3D modeling fan art project where I've been reimagining the Kingdom of Hyrule within the world and art style of The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. It's been a huge undertaking, this 3D modeling fan art project, and but it's been so rewarding to just fully realize this world that I've always wanted to see, how the islands of the Great Sea could be connected to the familiar landmarks of Hyrule, and also adding in new landmarks. So I take elements from different games and put them together, but I also create new locations, and I have to fill in the gaps in between what I can, in between what reveals itself to me, and sometimes I have to fill in the gaps with my own ideas, right? Because it's like, well, I could look at a world map like Breath of the Wild and say, well, that's a fully realized, like, Legend of Zelda map. Let me just copy its features. But then that wouldn't make sense. This is a new part of the timeline. It also has to correspond with the islands of the Great Sea and their sea chart, and how that, requires the certain placement of key features, right? Even just from the sea chart, we know where Death Mountain should be. We know where Kakiri Forest should be, right? And we can kind of make inferences about some of the other locations that seem to be connected to other locations in Hyrule, right? The sea chart requires a certain mountainous terrain, right? Because the placement of islands requires there to be a mountain underneath that island, etc. But anyway, I'm just rambling. Today we're working on a couple of forts, because here's the reality, right? Is that this is a Hyrule at war. I'm painting a picture of Hyrule as it could have existed right before the Great Flood. And today I just wanted to spend some time kind of, and it's mainly kit bashing more than it is actually 3D modeling, right? Because I know that, like, I have a couple of different approaches, and I don't know, like, it was nice today to kind of kit bash some things together, because it kind of made me feel aware that, like, the original Wind Waker game is packed full of, like, all these kind of details that already exist, right? And so just, like, as I, like, get ready to kind of fully populate the world with more and more kind of details, as, like, I feel aware that, like, well, I can pull a lot of stuff from the original game and continue to pull those assets as well to fully populate the world, right? And make it feel even more lived in, right? And there's furniture and just, like, all kinds of things I can pull in, right? And, like, that will help bring the world to life. So it was nice just through this video to kind of, like, get a feel for that, right? And the fort's, like, it's kit bashed with a couple of different elements, right? I'm pulling from, you may be able to clearly notice, the main asset for the structure of the fort is the flight platform that we saw in the Wind Waker, right? That was near Dragon Roost Island. And so I've used that kind of wooden structure as the basis for a new kind of battlements structure, right? And like, it's very helpful. And now that I kind of have this asset on hand, it may become helpful for other things. But as you'll see throughout the video, I'm able to pull so much into this structure, right? In different props from, that we see throughout the Wind Waker, like, tables and chairs and pots. And right, as I'm able to manipulate the structure, I pull market stalls from Windfall Island to kind of show, like, okay, well, how are they kind of protecting their resources that they require for the fort? I also want to kind of paint this picture that the Hyrulean army is, like, kind of over-preparing and that they kind of made a point of like having this home away from home. And maybe it's rough, but it's something that like they require all of this shipment of goods and resources to be able to build their fort, right? They require all of these extra crates and pots and bunk beds, and that's just the kind of thing that like the monster fort, right? Like, you know, like they would be able to, you know, like sleep in caves and sleep on the ground, and, you know, like as long as they're near one of their bases, you know, they don't need all these extra goods and resources at the fort. And so I just wanted to kind of paint that picture of like, you know, it just kind of shows that the Hyrulean army is slowed down by its necessity of transporting all of these extra materials, which is something that the monsters don't require because they're much more mobile, right? Because, right, just culturally, right, right, that they are more nomadic, right? So it's just like, I think that just painting that picture, even just through the design of the forts, is cool. And it's just like, yeah, like I've talked about this before in different videos, but definitely it's like, yeah, like this is a storytelling project. Even aside from, like, I do want to make cutscene style short films that exist in this world, but even just in the map itself, the map is a narrative piece in a way too. That even if you're not watching a movie or, you know, reading a script, you know, it's like you still get a feel for the story just by seeing the world and the story it suggests through environmental storytelling. And that's just something that, like, that's something I think about every time I model. And there's definitely times where I make creative decisions and it's more just like, well, I think this works and, you know, this is my preference, and maybe it's harder to defend. And, you know, that's definitely part of being an artist as well. But, like, I am really thinking about the logistics and the story and making sure everything fits within my vision of the world as well, right? And I want the world to suggest, like, suggest these stories as well. And so that's just something that excites me just about Wind Waker Unflooded and the map, and just being able to move forward with it, just as that, like, it tells a story, right? And it's just like, if you pay attention, if you engage with the map and, you know, take note of things, it will tell you, it'll teach you things about how I view certain things, right? Right, and like, you know, I guess to maybe be clear of that, to be clear about that is like, you know, this is Hyrule right before the Great Flood. Right, this is Hyrule as it exists in the prologue to the Wind Waker. This is Ganon is about to return, right? And how do things get so bad that a flood is inevitable and that's the only way to stop Ganon? How do things get that bad? It can't just be Ganon's sins, right? It has to be the sins of the Hyrule monarchy as well, right? And so I really want to use the world of Wind Waker Unflooded as well to continue to criticize not just, you know, the monarchy, right? But I also want to use it to criticize, you know, like it is a world shaped by differences in, I mean, economic differences, right? Between the haves, the have-nots. You have Hyrule Castletown that is opulent and prosperous, but it's only a small part of the map. And the rest of the villages, right? There's disparity economically, right? That, you know, Hyrule is hoarding its wealth amongst the elites, quote unquote. And so how does that transfer to, you know, other settlements, right? I think that's kind of an interesting question. How does that transfer to their relationship between the other tribes, right? And I think that it's clear that, and I've thought about this while making the map, is that like yes, there is like kind of an interconnectedness, like continental relationship between the tribes, but in many ways, the Gorons are not benefiting from Hyrule's infrastructure. The Zora are not benefiting from infrastructure. They've taken, you know, what used to be natural spaces and filled them with train tracks and dug out their own, you know, canals and, right, rerouted rivers, right, through their own tunnels and aqueducts. And, right, it's definitely like I mean, how do I put this? Like the manipulation of the natural world, that sin is committed first by the Hyruleans and the people serving the monarchy of Hyrule, right? And there definitely is, like, I think I think an awareness of that the other tribes of Hyrule are not committing that sin to that extent. Not to say that they're sinless and, you know, perfect in their own way, but there's definitely a relationship, right? In that, like, the Hyrulean settlements, there is a colonialistic urge that they have to conquer. That's part of the issue with their relationship to the Gerudo, right? That's something that we see Ganondorf talk about in the Wind Waker, right? Is them being exiled to these desert lands, right? Despite, wanting to be able to share the green fields of Hyrule, but those fields have been claimed by the Hyruleans, right? At the expense of the Gerudo being able to have a settlement there, right? Right. These border disputes. I mean, here's the thing, guys. Just like, this is a political piece. I know people are saying, get politics out of my art. Like, I'm sorry, art is political. Wind Waker Unflooded is political, right? And I don't want to say too much and be too on the nose, but I definitely think that, I don't know, I think that the way that I think about certain power structures, I think that is demonstrated by the art that I produce. And I guess, like, I want to make that clear that if you're, whether it's looking into the map of Wind Waker Unflooded, or whether you're watching, your favorite Star Wars movie, right, or whatever it is, like art is political, and it's not just escapism. And I know fantasy so many times is kind of simplified as being a genre about escapism, and I think that that's really an oversimplification. And I think about my favorite fantasy stories, and I feel that they are used to say something about the real world, whether that's Lord of the Rings. And I know people argue Lord of the Rings, like, and what it's specifically an allegory for, and whether it was meant to be an allegory for certain things. I know people argue that, but clearly it's meant to say something about real life experience. And even within Zelda games, and you look at the Wind Waker, I feel like it is, like, profoundly articulate about real world issues, whether it's the King of Hyrule coming to a realization that his obsession with preserving the past and tradition and history was coming at the expense of both the present and the future. And it's something that is natural. Like, it's natural for him to feel this loss for the world that was lost, not just for his kingdom and the kingdom that he possessed. He was the king of it. So it was his personal loss, right? And that there may be some selfishness there with his feeling of loss for Hyrule. But there was a lot of tragedy within the flood as well, I'm sure, right? Only so many people were commanded to flee to the mountaintops, right? And we're aware of that as the floodwaters came down. That's what we're told, is that there were basically the chosen ones, right, were commanded to seek shelter. And that wasn't everyone. So there was, I'm sure, a lot of loss in that. I'm sure the king feels for that as well. I'm sure Ganondorf feels for that. But also, when you cling to tradition, traditions have meaning. They can be meaningful. But a needless cling to tradition, especially without an understanding for those traditions, can be harmful, right? And you see that in Outset Island and the fact that, well, they have their own tradition of honoring the hero of time by asking young men to wear a green tunic when they come of the age of the hero of time, right? But anyway, I'm just rambling, but just like Wind Waker, I think, is profoundly articulate when it comes to, like, and those are all things that we deal with our own lives, and we have to have our own perspectives of history and how we interact with it. Will we learn from history? We should. And we should honor history, right? We should honor the ones that deserve honor. But we should not be so dedicated to how do I put this, to honoring the past that it ends up that we misunderstand it, right? And I don't know, I don't want to be too specific because I'm not sure what I can get away with saying on this channel necessarily, but I know that there have been wars fought in my country that, maybe people have reframed the war after it happened to be about something that maybe it wasn't about, and they've tried to honor the family members of theirs that used to fight in it, maybe despite not realizing that, I know they want to honor their family that fought, but what was their family fighting for? Was it righteous? And that's something that you have to decide. So anyway, I'm rambling, but these are big questions, and these are political questions, and these are just a couple of the things that I want you to think about while you pay attention to the world of Wind Waker Unflooded. Because I guess I think the Zelda universe, not just my interpretation of it, but I think the Zelda universe is one that deals with politics, and it deals with religion, right? And it deals with several major, like, big ideas, and it has its own take on, it has its own world with its own politics, its own religion, but it is still a story really about politics and religion. And so, of course, like, and I think that the games have something to say about politics and religion. I've been replaying Twilight Princess, and there's this line it's almost an aside, but Midna says something, and she's talking about Zelda, and she says something along the lines of, like, you know, isn't it silly that, you know, you have one person in charge that's so powerful? I'm paraphrasing. She doesn't exactly say that, but then she says something along the lines of, like, well, I can't fault her for a position she was born into, you know, right? It's not Zelda's fault that these power structures exist, right? She was born into it, and you can't fault someone for a position they were born into. However, you can fault someone for what they do within that position. And the Zelda of Twilight Princess, of course, shows that she's willing to be incredibly selfless in her position as a princess, right? And so it's like, you know, despite these power structures that existed before her, she is trying the best that she can to be selfless, right? And to provide for her people. But anyway, I'm rambling. I think that's enough for today. But yeah, just thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed watching this video. And yeah, just like it was pretty easy modeling today. Nothing too crazy. But yeah, like I think these forts add a lot, and I think they definitely help benefit the storytelling of this project. So it was a joy to go ahead and put them together. And without further ado, I think that's everything I have to show off. Comment down below what you want to see me work on next in the world of the Wind Waker Unflooded. Your suggestions really do impact what I work on, so feel free to comment down below your ideas. But without further ado, that's all I got. I'll let you go. Now, if you're looking for other ways to support me, as always, you can support me as a creator by becoming a member on Patreon. There you'll get access to all kinds of exclusive behind-the-scenes content like in-progress outlines, scripts, storyboards, rough cuts, and even soundtracks for my newest films. By becoming a member, you'll also be thanked in the credits for any film I finish during your membership. You can also support me by streaming my music. I compose all of the scores for my own short films, and you can listen to those soundtracks on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you listen to music. Just look up Joe Kendrick. That's JoeKendrick. Y'all have a wonderful day, and without further ado, I'll let you go.